So today we have three fantastic speakers. The first one is Jon Bennion. He's worked in data science and ML in the Bay for 9 years. He's ex-Disney, ex-Facebook, ex-Google. He contributed to Deep Eval. I looked it up on GitHub. It looks really like a cool project, an OSS eval framework for LLMs. And he created Fallacy Chain in LangChain. So with that.
Thank you. Until this kicks in. All right, thanks. So that was a great intro. Thank you. I'm kind of a recovering data scientist and MLE. I've been into AI applications all year, as a lot of us have. And this is the title of my talk. So I'm going to get into it, and I'm going to demo two things at the end. And then ideally, I'd have a ton of time for questions and answers, because I think that's where we're going to have the most learning. But let me just get into it and start thinking about your own applications for this. So first, just table of contents. I'm just going to introduce myself really quick, just for context on this topic. And then I'm going to do a quick RAG review, which is kind of boring at this point. I think we've all seen the same diagrams, but just to contextualize the problems of detecting and correcting for logical fallacies. And then I'm going to get into demos. So first, like I just said, my background in data and ML. I've been in the Bay Area for a while. I'm by no means an expert. I've been in data science and ML for so long that it's kind of boring. And so it was nice to see everything happen when the Llama weights had leaked this last March. And I've been working for a non-tech company this year, up until recently when I accepted a new role. But it was interesting to me to see how they were applying it, how they prioritized it. And it was Fox Corporation too. I had nothing to do with the news. They actually kind of kept me out of that. I was glad, because I'd have ethical struggles all day, I think. I don't know how they were optimizing. Well, I learned how they were optimizing. But anyway, so I didn't really want to help that situation. So anyway, so quick RAG. Just this is what we've all seen. This is extremely basic, but you have your end users that ask a question to some sort of interface, and then that is then referencing a foundation model that we're all well aware of, the multitudes, and then your encoded or your tokenized company data, depending on the use case for this question, and then that comes back in some sort of answer, right? And the problems happen with the response and then the context window, and I think that's what everyone that I talk to is just struggling with. How do we optimize the context window? How do we make it faster? Where do we place memory? Along with your chunk size strategies and stuff. I remember last week, it was the last week, the AI Engineer Summit. There's this guy that was talking about chunk size strategy, and I started asking questions because I was super curious on strategy, and no one knows. It just kind of digresses. No one has a strategy yet. I'm looking forward to tools that optimize on that, but we have to do it manually now. With all of this manual stuff that we're doing comes issues that we see, and I think we've all seen. I started using AutoGPT for the first time 2 weeks ago as well, and it just looped infinitely, and it was hilarious. Because I didn't either do it right, or there's just issues that I found out about. And there's issues as you start optimizing things. We all know about them. I don't have to go into every single type of issue, but I'm tackling one type. That's actually, this slide just kind of represents what happens here. I have a maze, because you have to figure out, you have to almost reverse engineer what it's doing at a certain point in time. So one of the many methods to fix this situation is using human feedback, reinforcement learning through human feedback, as we've learned, PPO and all that. I think I saw something here when I walked in about PPO. But then using AI to fix itself is obviously what I think a lot of people are starting to do with prompt engineering. They've been doing it for a long time. It's not a new thing, but I am actually this purpose of this talk is to walk through a process that I think was just really interesting. And I'd love for more questions and answers here. We just don't have the ton of time right now, but I'll make myself available like the next couple of days if you want to shoot me some sort of question. But I found a paper that was published in May of this year at the same time that I was trying to figure out bias for my use cases of Fox, because when you optimize these models, you have a success metric, and then the optimization is automatically going to be biased if there's more than one person using the model. Or if there's one person using the model, it's going to be biased towards the time of day or your mood or whatever, right? And however you want to optimize that. So I was trying to figure out bias, and I started to come across, well, I'm like, logical fallacy is kind of like your universal, like kind of broken logic that happens in these models. And we've all seen it, and it stops working. Sometimes you just kind of reset it if we're using a chat product, or if we're, we have our Jupyter notebook, just restart a kernel or something. But I found this paper that actually built on 13 logical fallacies that Aristotle had defined. And Aristotle, I don't know about you, but I don't think Aristotle could predict like what's happening right now with AI. Like GitHub, like if Aristotle was here, it'd be cool, but he's not, and he couldn't have predicted that. But he came up with logical fallacies that still exist today. So the model lent credibility to that. This has been a while, and then also it added 6 more in the context of language models, because we're talking about attention and transformers. And if you were to emphasize a word in the same sentence as a previous sentence that emphasized a different word, in some cases you'd have a different meaning, and in some cases you'd have a logical fallacy in that. And so that became a category that this paper had added to. That's just an example. And so I wanted to demo a fix for this using these. This paper is called Case-Based Reasoning with Language Models for Classification of Logical Fallacies. And what I ended up doing, because I wanted to set up a fix for myself on my laptop, and I thought, of everything that's out here, I just thought I'd throw it into LangChain. And they thought it was fun. They threw it into safety and then the experimental area too. So you have to kind of reference the LangChain experimental, fallacy removal base, and then the fallacy chain, and then the classes that I'll get into in a second, because I'll take you through the code relatively briefly. But you can scan this QR code if you can't read it, because it's a little small. If you're like me, I don't know, there's probably someone up at the top that can read it, and I want your eyes, because I can't do it. So anyway, so scan this code if you can't read this. But this will take you through the documentation for it, which I was going to demo. It might be a little small here, so let's just start going through. This is probably too small. Anyways, let me see if I can zoom. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Okay. So this is documentation. You can read it anywhere. What I did is I created a chain. I used LLM chain I called it misleading prompt. You can see the prompt. You have to respond by only using logical fallacies. I had to force it. You don't have to force it. I think a lot of us that have worked on them, when it happens. And so we don't really have to talk about it. It'll happen to you. You'll get there, especially as you start increasing the temperature even just a little bit. You'll see a lot of, it'll be fun to see creative stuff, and then it'll stop making sense. So I took misleading prompt, and what it's saying, I asked it, how do I know, this is the documentation, this is for the documentation, how do I know the Earth is round? And the response is, the Earth is round because my professor says it is, and everyone believes my professor, right? I don't know about you guys, but that would be, it'd be fun to play around with that, but that's obviously coming out of your model. It's especially if you're creating your tool for your stakeholders. So I apply a correction. So it detects the logical fallacy. This is fallacy chain. It detects the logical fallacy, critiques it, and then applies a response without that. So in this example, again, this isn't in documentation, so it's not like, you could go home and read it too, but you'll see that it appeals to authority and ad populum. Everyone believes it is because the professor said it was. And then it updates the response, finishes the chain. I have verbose equals true here set, so you can see what's going on. And then the output is you can find evidence of around Earth due to empirical evidence, like photos from space and everything like that. So, okay, this is just an example, but if you can take the same example and apply it to your use case, that's what I want. Like your use case, your stakeholders at work, your project, your startup, you're going to have a lot of issues that'll just happen, and we're all used to them happening. But this is super revolutionary. It's using a little bit of prompt engineering. It's actually really using the context window as a problem. So it's really, I think, really using it really well, because that was one of the issues that created this problem was a small context window. And that's that. I can go through the code really quick, just briefly. I can't go through line by line, but there's in LangChain, I'm going to zoom in on this because that's impossible to read. At some point, it's going to be too big, and I won't be able to get back. Okay, so LangChain experimental fallacy removal is where it is, and then this is absurd. But this is just to tell you what it is. It's just a list of the fallacies that were extracted from that paper, so that doesn't become added to latency. And then here, this is the base, the Python here. So there's basically a critique chain and a revision chain. And that's called here, and this is the prompt engineering behind it. I want to zoom in because it's kind of interesting because you could put this in anywhere. And you can use fallacy chain for it, which I prefer because it's cool because it's easy. If you use LangChain, just sequential chain, just have, if you have two chain, you have one, your first chain, you could add this to your sequential chain or any kind of hybrid of something like that, or an agent even. And then you'll have this working for your model output. And then you can even throw it into your like your callback handler. So that was my demo. So then I went a little step further. There's going to be a tangential thing that I want to demo, which is fun. So let's see if it works. It might not work. These things never work. But I created, if you go to fixnews.ai, I had fun applying it to there's just a framework to like documents, emails. If you can imagine it, like if I was doing a sales pitch, someone asked me if I was doing a sales pitch, it's like, no, I don't really do sales very well. But if I was doing it, I would want to sell it, like imagine it in a meeting, calling people's fallacies out and recommending they say something else or something. But if you can imagine it applied to the news as well, if you can imagine it, like I don't want to do this example because it would evoke a lot of feelings that I don't think are super fair, but like anything in the Middle East would be interesting. But that's like intuitive. You know what would happen. There's going to be logical fallacies all over the place because that's how the news is coming from the Middle East. It's been coming that way for a long time. But if you do something like, whatever, I had a fun time searching COVID with this, just extracting from news articles. I have it extracting a summary, a link, and if there's any logical fallacies, and then ranked in order of like importance, and then the dangers that it would pose, and then a counterfactual. And so you can type in a URL or search. I'm going to see if this works for China, and just to demo it. It did earlier, so we'll see if it doesn't work. That's fine. My day's been going really interesting in terms of technical issues, so we'll see how this goes. But okay, cool. So this is cool. It's at fixnews.ai, and it's open sourced as well on my GitHub. But this is gonna have, I have it limited to, well, first of all, you have to input your own like OpenAI key and server. I can't afford for the link to be sent out and then suddenly owe $1 billion to these companies if they, circulates around the world. But once you enter your API keys, you'll have this thing coming back. And this is just a demo of this framework working for a use case that I thought was interesting. But again, imagine it applied to your own use case, because that's where it gets really fun. But this uses some prompt engineering too on top of the framework for logical fallacies of that paper. But the summary of the article, an analysis of the top, this happens to reference, I don't know, you guys can read it, axios.com, which is not a website that I go to all the time. And the top ranked logical fallacy in the article is the appeal to authority as it relies on the statements and opinions of these people. or leaders of the world. And then the theoretical counterfactual I also really like. I feel like this could be a cool thing. And so I wanted to ask everyone here too, before I end this, if anyone here is really good at front end, because I'd love to do this tomorrow. I have this back end set up, and if anyone wants to shoot me a note, I'll tell you where you can shoot me a note. Again, this isn't a sales pitch. This is just something that I did, and again, it's a demo for this framework, which I'd love for you to apply. But if anyone wants to help, feel free, because I think it's kind of fun. I had screenshots in case that didn't work, and my information is here. If you want to scan this QR code, it probably won't go to my LinkedIn, where I guess sorry to be a LinkedIn person right now, but I mean, I actually hadn't posted anything to LinkedIn until a month ago. So it's a new thing for me now. I've been working for a long time in data, and I just didn't really ever care about it. And now it's kind of interesting. Yeah, okay, cool, thanks. So we have time for probably I don't want to say a half question, that'd be silly. This is such a cool topic to discuss. But I think we have time for maybe I hate to say it, but one question, whoever looks the most studious, or
let's thank our speaker.
Okay.
Jon.
All right, cool.
And I want to say, especially our first speaker yesterday, we said he was sick, and Jon stepped up as a volunteer. So extra thanks to Jon for sharing. Cool. Sharing. I have a quick question. What was it like? What were the pain points contributing to LangChain?
Sure. The biggest pain points, LangChain, as I think we all know. I mean, raise your hand if you've had a problem with LangChain. Okay. Oh, raise your hand if you have not had a problem with LangChain. Okay, so the denominators then. Okay, so interesting. Yeah, the versions change, syntax changes. It sucks, but if you find a stable version, keep it. And that's all I'm going to say about that. That was the biggest issue. But thanks. Cool.
Questions?
Cool. Oh, cool.
I was attempting to follow your code, but where you showed the GitHub, why did you choose that, and where we can find that particular GitHub code, the notebook?
Can you repeat your question one more time?
I was attempting to follow your notebook because the QR code took me to the documentation.
Sure.
So why did you choose that particular notebook, and where we can find it?
I'm not sure if I understand that. Can you say it one more time? Sorry.
Yeah.
Cool.
Where to find the code?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, thank you. Okay. So the LangChain has changed this syntax. It's moved from it used to be LangChain/LangChain on GitHub, and now it's LangChain-AI. So I actually find it by Google searching, just LangChain, GitHub. You'll get there. It sucks. You'll get there. Then you'll go into libs. It's the folder libs. And then you'll see an experimental folder. You'll see experimental and then the rest of their stuff. That's just how to get to the code. You can even search LangChain sequential chain, and you'll end up at that path. And then you just have to come up, and then you'll see experimental. And experimental is where you can hit it. There used to be the SQL database. What is it? A tool? I don't know. The class, whatever you call it, is a tool. I think it's an agent now. It's the gray area on definitions, but it used to be where the SQL database stuff is.
And we'll send out the recordings, and so you can give me the link, and I can send it out.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Cool.
Hey, thanks for the talk. Awesome topic. Has there been any human review or feedback of the AI's conclusion on logical fallacies that maybe resonated or didn't agree or whatever?
I love that. Not officially, but unofficially, it's going to make people upset, right? If you bring up logical fallacies. So I've seen in the inside of the prompt, you can dive into it in some of the prompting. The word polite is used, which I think is cool. But were you wondering whether or not people were liking it or not liking it, or maybe if people disagree? What I think is interesting about this is people can disagree, but it's a logical fallacy. So it's just how do you disagree with logic that is, that's what I love. That's what got me into this, is that bias was hard because everyone has their own subjective thing going on. And that's going to be an impossible problem to solve, I think. And, it's going to lead to a lot of issues. But logical fallacies, I think it's solvable. So that's what led me to this. Cool. I think that's, oh, yeah, please.
Could there be two logical fallacies for the same thing?
Yeah, there can. And I have this set to rank based on the most, what I call the most important logical fallacy or the most powerful logical fallacy, which I leave up to the model to decide.
But there could be like two different sequences how that same statement can have a logical fallacy.
Yeah, the documentation is actually an example of how you have to, in theory, if you're referring to that like an output. Yeah, cool. Great question. Thanks. Oh, wow. All right. This might have to be the last question, but I love this, so it's hard for me to go away, but yeah.
I'm curious if you did any, I'm really curious if the model has a concept of these logical fallacies in the weights, if you did any fine tuning to try and find like, oh, let me average all these logical fallacies and find where this is in the model weights.
That is such a good question. And that's why this is, okay, so it won't recognize that if the more that you do RAG, and let's say you do RAG and then you have documents that are similar on content, but they're exact similar on content. So you ask a question and then let's say that the metadata is the exact same, but different authors opposing sides, maybe some legal opinion or something. You'll have that happen. It'll come back like all weird. It'll combine those sometimes. And it won't recognize that. And that's actually why I had to do this. That's really weird, and it gets really interesting. So that's a great question.
Thanks.
I hope I answered your question. Okay, cool. How much does it cost? It depends on what model you use, and because it can be expensive, and depends on what. Wait, 1,500 worder?
1,500 word article. I go to CNN.com.
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's get thinking that way. Ping me because that's, I think, interesting. It's the most of the cost. Okay, so if I have it set to use 3.5 turbo, so that's like what, a cent or something, negligible. But then the SERPer, it sucks, the Google API. And so I have it filtered on news for this, for what I did, the fixednews.ai. But that's going to cost money, and they could charge whatever they want once they find out that's going on, because Google's not doing this yet. I think they should be. I heard about stuff that happened at Google News last week where people were let go. It sucks because they could have done something like this with what's coming out. I don't know. It's hard for me to track what's coming out of Google now, but yes, everything that's going on there. There's a lot. So how much does it cost? It's whatever Google wants to charge for that API hit. Now there might be a way around that. What? Yeah, that's actually, or as a crawler. That's exactly, thanks for thinking that way. We can collectively hit this. I think we could say something was born here tonight, maybe. I don't know, hopefully. But thank you all.
That's going to be, so let's thank our speaker again. Thanks. Okay. So our next speaker, Filip Haltmayer. He's a software engineer at Zilliz, where I work. And if any of you have reached out on customer support through GitHub discussions, you have probably spoken to Filip. So I will, and Filip is going to be showing how he did an integration of Kafka with our managed service Zilliz.
Awesome. Hopefully the mic works. Yeah, so today I'm going to be going over RAG on stream data. And it's mainly about talking about how you can use Kafka and Milvus together to kind of create a real-time RAG service. So yeah, a little bit about what I'm going to be talking over is what is RAG. You never really know the audience how much information they have about it, how much they know, how much they don't know. So I always like going over a bit of it. And then next is what is stream processing? Again, don't really know how much you know about stream processing, how much you don't know about Kafka, PubSub, and that sort of things. So I'm going to go over that, and then a quick demo at the end for parsing and searching Hacker News, which was kind of a POC for can we get a Confluent connector working, and which led to the one that we're releasing soon. So a little bit about myself. I'm a software engineer here at Zilliz. I've been here for roughly 2.5 years now. And Zilliz was founded in 2017. We're headquartered in Redwood Shores, and we are a vector database company. And we're working on a lot of other projects as well, mostly open source. We have Milvus, which is our vector database, Autu, which is kind of our GUI for our vector database, Tohi, which is the step above. It's about kind of creating embeddings from any unstructured data. GPT Cache, popular project now, but about caching your LLM calls to avoid having too many calls to OpenAI, which can get pretty expensive. And then VDB Benchmark and Nowhere are 2 projects for vector search and kind of comparing and kind of what we're using internally. So yeah, what is RAG? So I'll quickly go over what RAG is. As previously mentioned, LLMs have a few problems. They're limited in what they can answer on based on what they train on. So a lot of the times you'll see that an LLM is trained up to a certain date. And if you ask a question that it doesn't know about, it might say, oh, I wasn't trained up until then. This is my guess. This knowledge can't really be updated without kind of retraining the model. And they also have a tendency to hallucinate answers, which comes in the form of kind of lying or making up responses for a question. This is usually when it doesn't really know what the answer is, or it thinks that that's the answer, because all it's pretty much doing is just guessing each next word. And what is the solution here? The solution is RAG. And with this, we're using vector databases to do semantic similarity search across our corpus of data to allow us to give context to the answer. So instead of the LLM having to think up of the answer, all it has to do is summarize an answer based on some previous information that we give to it. And that is pretty much RAG summed up. So kind of going deeper into that, what is semantic similarity? This is probably the most popular example of semantic similarity. It's the word to the kind of queen and king example where different distances of these words and their vector embeddings, you can kind of add and subtract them to create new words and to kind of figure out the relationships between different words. This is one of the first examples of semantic similarity and one of the ones that are most popular. There's another one with, I think, like phone minus Apple is Droid or something along those lines, but these kind of relationships between embeddings that represent your words or text. And what we can do with that is we can create a similarity search pipeline. So if we know that different embeddings have can kind of be in the same latent space and their distances can correlate to how similar the text is, we can create an index across that. And with that index, we can search across different texts very quickly using the power of semantic search. And this is a very general semantic search pipeline. Pretty much what you do is you take any unstructured data, you have a model for your unstructured data that can turn it into embeddings. So you use that model to create these embeddings. And with these embeddings, you can plug them into your vector database. And when you have a query, you can take a similar unstructured data, throw it through the same model to get an embedding. And with similarity search, you can get the closest results. So the closest, let's say you're doing image search. If you store a bunch of images of a certain shoe, if you search for a shoe of similar design, it will throw out those same results. And this can be across video, audio, images, whatever you name it. Just depends on if you have a model for embedding those data types. So how does this play into RAG? This is pretty much a general RAG example. This diagram was provided by Arise AI. We did a meetup with them recently, and I really thought this diagram was pretty good. So what you end up doing is you end up you have 3 steps. You have the embedding, the search, and the prompt engineering step. So the first step, the embedding step, is pretty much what we went over in the slide before. And this is taking your data and throwing it through an embedding model. In this example, we're using OpenAI, which has the embedding ADA model. And with this, we convert our text into embeddings. What we do then is we can store it in Milvus or Zilliz. And when you have a query come in, you use the same embedding model and you search it against the Milvus and Zilliz. And what this result gives you are a few context text blocks. And with these text blocks, we can throw it into a prompt and send that prompt to OpenAI again to create an answer, or to kind of summarize the context to create an answer. And what a prompt looks like is something like this. This is from the demo. It's a pretty simple one. You're pretty much assigning ChatGPT a role of you're a question answering bot that answers questions based solely on the provided context. In your response, you must reference each context by its ID in the answer. And this is kind of forcing the ChatGPT to use your context as the source of truth and kind of format how you want the responses. The only issue is here that there can still sometimes be hallucinations. This is always changing. Whenever the model gets updated, your prompt might not work on a new revision of ChatGPT. So this is all still a work in progress, and kind of where a lot of the prompt engineering work is being done is how can you solidify these prompts to make sure that you're getting the right answers from your contexts. So that kind of goes over quickly what RAG is. The next part is what is stream processing. So you pretty much can break down processing of data into two kind of fields, stream and batch. They're pretty different, very different actually. But what it kind of breaks down to is streaming is for real-time data. So in processing real-time data, ingesting real-time data, and what you care about is low latency. In the case of low latency, it's stateless, usually your operations on this. And the low latency means that for every kind of request you get, you're performing your action just on that request and returning a result. You're not doing any batching. You're not usually waiting for a bunch of data to come in so you know your balance of data and then performing your action on it. Instead, you're quickly firing off computations on singular inputs. This is great for a lot of kind of projects where you need liveliness guarantees. If you can't afford to wait for your batch job to finish before you can kind of see the new data, you need to be using kind of stream-based data processing. An example of this is kind of a tweet search. So if you are searching for popular tweets, you need those tweets to be indexed immediately. You need them to be visible to your search engine. You need to have them up to date all the time. And this means that you can't just wait every day to go in and go over all your new tweets and index them. You have to constantly be indexing them. You have to constantly be updating them. And that's where stream kind of based approach works. Batch is kind of on the other end. It's mainly for offline data processing and ingestion. And what this means is you usually have a job maybe every 2 hours, every day, which kind of takes up all your data that you've gotten in the last day, and then you at once go and perform on it. And this is a lot higher throughput usually. A good example of this is, let's say, neural network, when you're using a neural network on some data and you're doing inference. Inferencing on a large batch is very useful. It helps with throughput, and it also ends up being faster for that batch and more efficient. But you need to know how much data you have ahead of time to decide your batch size. You need to know all these things about your data in order to optimize how you're processing it. And the good thing about this is it's a lot simpler upkeep, being that there's only one job running. You can kind of trace down where your problems are coming from. With a lot of stream-based approaches, it can get kind of complicated to debug where your problems are coming from, because every job is for a certain input and they're firing constantly. And you can sometimes lose that input based on if it's a stateless operation. If your Kafka is failing, that stateless job might lose its source of data, and then you lost that data. How do you debug that? Instead of offline, where you're storing all your data, then acting on it at once. And an example use case for this is, let's say you're storing all the market close data for stocks. So at the end of the day, the last stock price. You don't need to be constantly doing small checks for every single stock price. Instead, at the end of the day, you can just grab all of them and then perform your process and analysis on all of them at once. And then how to choose between the two, kind of how I was previously stating. Streaming for fast responses, and a lot of the times it's for things like user queries. You don't have time to wait to collect a bunch of different user queries and perform a single operation across them. You kind of want to do them on the fly. And then also when you need to interact with live data. You kind of need the liveliness, which comes with the streaming. And then for batch, again, it's the need of efficiency. It's usually cheaper. You can also optimize a lot better. If you know how much data you have, you know the bounds of this is the oldest data, this is the newest data, and I want to perform this action on this data. You'll know all of it, and then you can optimize there. And an example for that was the neural network interface. And then, yeah, also if you don't need live data, there's no point in putting all the overhead for stream-based data or processing. And then a backbone of stream processing is Kafka. I'm not sure how familiar people are with this, but it's an asynchronous event-driven messaging system. Pretty much what it is, it's a bunch of pipes connecting different events and different servers together and kind of sending messages between them. And this is the backbone because it kind of shows when you have a new message and it sends it to the right person to be handling this message, or right server to be handling this message. And it falls into 3 categories. Mainly, these are the simplest ones. It's the producer, consumer, and the topic. You can think of the producer as the person creating that new message or that new piece of data. The topic is your queue of data they have to act on. And your consumer is the one acting on that data and performing analysis and also performing operations on it. So a quick demo of kind of how this looks. I'll start running the demo now while I go over it. And as previously mentioned, it's a live demo, so we'll see how everything works. It can be a little bit finicky, but what this demo is doing is it's grabbing all the new Hacker News posts from their API and indexing them within Milvus and then performing RAG on searches. Let me get back to the slides so I can kind of go over the architecture. So this is the general architecture of kind of a RAG-based program and a stream-based program for RAG. So the first step is kind of parsing the Hacker News. And as you can see, there's kind of two colors. There's purple and blue. Purple is for data ingestion, and blue is for query ingestion and kind of query responses. So for data ingestion, it kind of goes with, first it starts with Hacker News. You need to grab your data that you want to act on. And in here, we have a Hacker News parser, which is just firing every 60 seconds to grab the latest 500 new topics or new posts on Hacker News, sends them through Kafka over to an embedder. And what the embedder is doing is just using a sentence transformer to embed your text data. So we grab all the article data. We use unstructured.io, who was originally supposed to speak at this meetup, but we use them for parsing this unstructured data. What they're good at is PDFs, websites, all these different things. They can kind of break it down into just a text kind of block and grab all the relevant data as text. So we use that to grab from all the articles on Hacker News that are being posted, to grab all the text data. We're embedding that and storing it within Zilliz. When a query comes in, the user's question goes through the same embedder, but this time we don't use unstructured to kind of parse it. We just take this direct text question and we embed it using the sentence transformer, search against our vector database to get the relative contexts, and then throw them back out through a prompt that gets sent to ChatGPT, which then kind of creates your answer for you. And then this gets sent back to the user. And let's see if this is working. Hopefully. So this is just a simple UI I made. And it shows here kind of all the Hacker News articles that are getting parsed right now. These are all coming from today. I did preload some relevant articles because you never know, there are constantly new articles coming out. So just some preloaded questions to kind of see how this works. So one of them is, does compression have any equal use cases? And there was an article that popped up before, and there's already probably roughly like 600 to 700 articles in here. But there was an article that popped up before that was about gzip, using it as a classification model for minst. So does compression have any cool use cases? Yes, compression does have cool use cases as shown in this context, and it shows the link to a Hacker News article. Oops. Let's see, I think. So one of these Hacker News articles was, talking about using gzip as a classification model for minst. And what this program did was it went into this article, it grabbed all the relevant text data here, chunked it out, and stored it within Zilliz to later be searched, and then most likely the keywords of compression and use case was kind of triggering the semantic similarity. There are other examples as well of some other kind of articles. This was how confident is the US in its media, and most likely there will be a response. We'll see. But based on this, and this is where sometimes the hallucinations within prompts happen, where if you look here, the ID used in this prompt response is different than the one before. Technically, both are valid IDs, but it decides differently what the ID is. So in the second answer, the ID was just an int. So Hacker News uses an int as an ID for an article. But in the first one, it used the URL as the ID. And this is somewhere where prompt engineering comes into play, where you have to figure out and kind of stabilize this of, it can sometimes change. It can still hallucinate even though you're using RAG. Even though you're giving it solid data, it can still make up some things. It can still kind of do things differently than how you expect. But yeah, that's the general example. And then if I kind of do a random question, most likely it should say that it doesn't have any context available. Yeah. So this is it saying, kind of using the prompt of, if you don't have a context, don't answer, or don't give an invalid answer. And then we can kind of go back. So some demo decisions for this, being that this was kind of like a POC, Confluent is doing some programs for connecting different databases to Confluent using their connectors. As a POC, this was more about showing that it would work and kind of how we outline it and how it would work. So a few things that I had to do here. So one thing is, so before the first time I was using one pipeline for embedding both the Hacker News articles and for the questions. The only issue is we're pumping over 500 Hacker News articles at a time, and that fills up the queue for creating the embedding. So you have to separate your user questions and the embedding of articles to add in, because one would block the rest. Another thing that I was doing is that Kafka normally likes to use internal queues. It likes to kind of cache up some messages before it sends them all at once. This is kind of for efficiency. But if you're doing a live demo like this, where you need results to happen pretty fast, you can't use that internal queuing. Even though it's more efficient, it's not really applicable here because you'll lose your liveliness. And then for the Milvis collection in the vector database, we have to use strong consistency, which has read after writes. Again, for a demo like this, you want your results as fast as possible. You can't really afford waiting for some, in the terms of Milvis, you can't afford lower consistencies because then your results might not be there. And for Kafka, if you use internal queuing, your question might get queued up and then it might wait, and your latency for the response might be a lot longer. And then in this example as well, we're doing some cross-checking of what we've already inserted, because currently with the Hacker News API, it sends the 500 newest posts, but it doesn't kind of know that there have been this many since this time. So it will keep sending the same 500 over. So you don't want to avoid embedding. You want to avoid inserting and deleting all these repeated articles. So we just cross-check them on what's already inserted. And yeah, this is for the Zilliz Kafka integration that should be coming out, I think, tonight. But if anybody likes using Kafka and wants to connect it to their Zilliz cloud or Milvis, that should be coming out, and it should make this a lot easier. And then any extra resources for Milvis and other open source projects, check them out. And yeah, that should link to zilliz.com, where we have free trials. So if you ever want to mess around with vector databases, feel free. Awesome.
So sounds like you had a lot of hard lessons that you learned there.
Yeah.
Questions?
You sort of highlighted a very interesting point around the context window, like especially, let's say, I'll give you a use case, and then if you can think of how we can solve it. So let's say if you have to build a summarizer, give me the summary of everything that happened in Hacker News today.
Mm-hmm.
So now this is difficult because it doesn't actually matches the similarity bound, but you still want that filter to be applied. Do you know how something like this could be built?
Most likely what you could, like a simple solution would be to, something that could be possible, you could hard code into your vector database or insert some kind of placeholder for a sentence embedded that's sort of like that. You want a summarization of everything that happened in Hacker News, something that can get a really close match. And with that, it can trigger something else happening within your program to, okay, when this result is returned with this ID, this means query against grab all our data from Hacker News in the past day and then feed that into the LLM. Or you could do it, you can't really integrate it super simple. Like you'd have to do like a kind of if check of your question, or either do some similarity check for that kind of question beforehand if you want to avoid the entire pipeline. But using just the LLM and what you have here, it like the hacky solution of putting in a vector with that kind of text is that it might not always be found. There might be some random Hacker News article that is just that text, which then might trigger some breakage. So you'd have to do something ahead of time. And for that, you could probably, again, embed the question and have a few embeddings of what happened today, and then just check if the distance is within X amount. You don't need to use a vector database. You can just do a manual cosine distance and see, hey, this is close enough. Let's check if we want that.
How would you do token by token streaming and cancellation once you do the generation with this architecture?
What was the question?
How would you do token by token streaming as well as mid generation cancellation?
That would pretty much happen for token by token, like in terms of the query getting kind of, it doesn't really use token by token. Like for cancellation, that would ultimately happen in this, it would ultimately happen at the client level where it's getting sent out, where you would still go through the pipeline. Like it's kind of a pretty much, you need the full question to give the response. And if it's kind of streaming of the results of the LLM, if that's what you mean, there's probably some way with their API to kind of get the results in a streamed fashion. I think you can grab it using their OpenAI connector. I'm not sure if that really answers the question, but we don't really, like in this style of thing, we kind of deal with the full question and answer at once.
I'm the CEO of Scenario Capital, which is a VC company that supports startups. So my question is that how does Zilliz technology provide the protection for customer privacy and confidentiality? Thank you.
Yeah, that happens in a lot of ways. Like we follow like the SOC compliances, and we just follow like encryption at rest and S3 and all the kind of the AWS encryptions that happen. But the biggest thing I think like that applies to all vector databases is for your vectors themselves, vectors are a lossy compression. Yeah, there's a lot of research to kind of recreating your original data. If you have the model, you have the exact model being used, you know everything that comes in and out of it, then there's like a, I don't know what % chance of kind of extracting your original data. But most of the time, going backwards is very difficult and it's very hard to do. And that's pretty much kind of an encryption itself. It's not like you don't go to other companies and say, oh, your vectors are encrypted because they're vectors. But it's kind of a very big thing that helps with this, because if you're using OpenAI, no one has access to their models. So you can't do this backwards generation of embedding to text unless you spend a lot of money and kind of randomly try throwing different text to kind of build up a latent space. But other than that, databases, they follow a lot of different, there's work in semantic similarity search, so indexes, vector indexes that can work on hashed vectors and keep that cosine distance and cosine kind of latent space even after hashing. So that kind of allows, there might be a play there of kind of encrypting your data before you even send it into Zilliz or a vector database. But outside of that, it's just kind of the regular ways databases encrypt their data.
Could you talk a little bit more? The last example where you said, what is weather? And it said, hey, I can't answer this. I wasn't really fully understanding how that happened. So what I'm interested in is how can you get this architecture to say, I don't have information about blah. So maybe this is context.
Yeah,
this is something else.
So like one thing I think that's happening. So first of all, that mainly happens to the prompt. With the prompt, you can kind of specify as a role, like when you describe the role, and that's OpenAI is kind of implementing that on their end. You can kind of tell it what to do and what not to do. But there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes at OpenAI when they're updating their models, which when I was kind of making this, one role worked before and then didn't work for the next, or like one description of the role for ChatGPT didn't work in the next update. So they're doing things behind the scenes where you can kind of see before also it would sometimes answer without a context, but now every time I try, it just fails. It says I don't have a context, so I can't. So it's on your end, you have the prompt and the role assignment. And on OpenAI's end, they're doing work internally, I think, where they see context and these kind of keywords to see, okay, let's do some kind of checking on the result. But mainly it's through prompt. That's the only method you
We have time for one more question.
Thank you. Great talk. One of the things that you mentioned right at the outset is the real-time recomputation of the index. So can you talk a little bit about some of the trade-offs you ran into, respect to like latency of recomputing the index versus sort of like continuing to serve your RAG pipelines?
Yeah.
What were some learnings?
So for Milvis and Zilliz in general, all our indexes are kind of by default real time. We grow our indexes, or we don't grow, like this kind of gets into pretty specific details, but what we deal with is we deal with segments. So all our data is in 512 megabyte chunks where we're inserting data, and once you hit 512, we seal it and then index that. And every 512 megabyte chunk has its own index. And then with that, we can kind of handle streaming a lot of data. We can have multiple segments growing, and that kind of helps. So on the vector database Milvis Zilliz side, we see everything sort of as stream data. There is bulk insert, which we kind of allow for taking in like a giant segment at once and inserting it. But yeah, in general, it's, we deal all of it as streamed. Bulk insert's always faster because you don't have to build up these segments. Instead, you just get an entire segment pumped in. But then there's also kind of, I think I mentioned before, is that there is one kind of hard part about our approach is upserts and deletes. This is kind of this last bullet point. where being that we work on these unmutable 512 megabyte chunks, every delete's a soft delete, which ultimately, if let's say I was doing upserts for this example and I was upserting the same 500 articles every 60 seconds, you would kind of run into some problems of with the soft delete filling up your bit set and then having to remake the segment, re-index. So that's kind of why I avoided it. We're working on that, but ultimately that's kind of the segment approach is a problem with it. But that's the general gist. I don't know if that really answers it, but the way we look at it is mainly streamed when you look at it within the Milvis and the indexes.
All right, let's thank Filip again. So our final speakers tonight, Rob Crystal Ormelis, data analyst. He's been a data scientist with 8 years of experience engineering machine learning models in Python and R, yay R. He has led 20 data science experiments from designing ETL data sets to building ML models, implementing A/B tests, and visualizing data visualizations. And Kasia also is the staff product manager leading growth for GitHub products, including GitHub Copilot. She's a product partner of Microsoft Research's special project team, the Plural Technology Collaboratory, where she leads work on Gov4Git, a platform for governing open source projects. Let's welcome our speakers.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me? So, hey everyone, welcome to GitHub. I hope you guys are enjoying this meetup. We're super excited to host you guys and all developers, as it's a home for all developers. So welcome again to our headquarters. So my name is Kasia Sitkevich, and I'm a staff product manager. I have over 10 years of product management experience, and I was born and raised in Poland. And a fact about me, I was a sprinter runner. I was in national team in Poland, so I'm very athletic. All right, and I'll pass it to Rob.
Hey everyone, I'm Rob. I'm a data analyst here. I work on Copilot. I used to be a teacher for high schoolers. I used to be a professor in stats at University of San Francisco, just up the road here. Now I work on Copilot on the prompt engineering team. I like biking a lot. I live in the East Bay, so you can catch me riding around the Berkeley Hills most weekends. And as Kasia said, thanks all for being here. Super excited to have this event, or co-host this event, be here with y'all.
Awesome. So this is just a quick view on the agenda. We will briefly talk about the GitHub Copilot, what it is. I assume most of you have heard about it, but we'll just give you like a brief overview. Then we will jump into demo, and we will provide you with some kind of summary and resources. And at the end, we will have like a few minutes to answer any questions about Copilot. So with that, I assume you guys know, but this is something I want to bring up. Copilot is an AI programmer that helps you write code faster with less work. And basically, it just provides you with code suggestion, autocomplete. It helps you find documentations, catch syntax errors, help you learn languages and frameworks. It's really cool that you have an assistant to help you with solving all of the technical bugs, write unit tests, fix security issues, and get answers to the coding questions. So it's actually a really nice assistant for you while you're coding. And the numbers really speak for itself. Developers, we have like a customer research who talk to developers, and we learned that actually Copilot helps you write code faster by 55%, which is really good. Developers on average when using Copilot are more fulfilled and like satisfied. And 46% of the code written is written by Copilot. So we truly believe that in the near future, there won't be any development without some kind of AI assistant. So it's a really promising way for this type of tools. Next slide. All right, so this is a quick demo of what Copilot can do, and pretty much it's a quote from a tweeter. There was a Copilot helps with like tasks like translations. So just a quick snippet of what Copilot can do. Yeah, you pretty much write a prompt, it just automates it for you, those like tedious tasks that no one likes to do. And I think Rob now will do a live demo of Copilot, and then we will jump into some kind of other resources.
Okay, so I'll just switch screens here. Just a moment. How's that look? That look okay? Okay, cool. So we're gonna build a rock, paper, scissors game. And I'm gonna start right now with a blank Python file. We're gonna build this up in Python. And when I interact with Copilot, I usually like to start by writing a comment, giving Copilot something to work with. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the types of context that Copilot can kind of pull in, but let's start by asking, hey, let's write a rock, paper, scissors game. Maybe I'll make that font a little bigger. Let's write a rock, paper, scissors game, import the random module. You'll see my comment there in the gray, and then kind of in the lighter gray, you'll see the suggestion that Copilot's making. I hit the tab button, and that accepts the whole line that Copilot's suggesting. So then I'll say, let's define a main function. Cool. That handles kind of the logic of the game. Great. This is getting cut off a little bit, but it says, let's set up all the possible choices for rocks, paper, scissors. Well, there's rocks, paper, or scissors, and store it in an object. We've got our choices object now. We're gonna let the computer choose something, rocks, paper, scissors. We'll create another object to hold whatever we choose as the users. And then, of course, we want to hold the result of the game. We want to know if we win, lose, tie. And then here's where I really like what Copilot can help me with as a developer. I write this comment that says, check the results of the game, and then Copilot does the tedious work of checking the logic of rocks, paper, scissors. These multi-line completions are really, can really be nice time savers for y'all. So we'll let Copilot fill that in for us. Now Copilot's saying, do we want to print the results? Okay, we could just print whether we win or lose the game. That's fine. But we always suggest with Copilot, Copilot's your pair programmer. It's not like your only programmer. You can also tell Copilot, hey, that's not quite right. I actually want to print first what the computer chose, then what we chose as the user and the result. So we can kind of tune it a little bit. And then, yeah, let's print the result there. And we'll call the main function. Okay. Live demos are always fun, so let's just double check. How this all looks. Okay, so we'll get our command to choose rocks, paper, scissors. Computer chose scissor, we chose rock, we win. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave us exiting this game as winners. That worked for me. And then I'm excited to show y'all Copilot Chat, which we made available to the public just a few weeks back. If you have Copilot for individuals or business or whatever, you have access to Copilot Chat. You can open up the window on the side of your VS Code and ask it something like, hey, how can I make this rock, paper, scissors game I just created a little more efficient? It'll integrate some context here from the tab you have open. And I'll expand this a little bit. it'll start by saying, hey, you've got multiple else if statements. Here's how you can make it a bit more efficient. Maybe dictionary, kind of using a dictionary here. Then you can highlight the code you want to get rid of. Say, we can say goodbye to that. And then use this little button here to just take the Copilot suggestion, save that, and you could rerun your game again with the more sort of efficient version that Copilot's offering there. I use that feature a lot. Okay. Now, I'm going to just do a quicker second demo here of me as a data analyst, how I really use Copilot in my day-to-day, not quite making rock, paper, scissors game, but doing data analysis. So I'll import this penguins data set. Oh, and I used to be an environmental scientist, so we got to learn a little thing or two about penguins. And we'll import a penguins data set from Seaborn, import another library there, and then we'll say, hey, let's take a quick look at the data. This data set has information on penguin species, their bill length, their bill depth. I like to look at, just do quick data visualization, look at the length of a penguin's bill versus the depth of it. We can see a bit of clustering here. And so we might then say, hey, let's color code some of the dots by species of penguin. And it's those, for me at least, when I use these plotting libraries, it's remembering what those little arguments are to change the font size, change the color, that I never remember for the particular module I'm using. And so Copilot kind of takes the guesswork out of that. Okay, we've got our scatter plot, but then I can hop over to chat in this window and I can say, hey, how can I make this plot a little more legible? It'll recognize I'm working in this Jupyter notebook now. And say, let's use Seaborn, let's use matplotlib, expand the font size on the axes, add some labels. We'll clean up the labels for your X and Y axes. And I'll bring that in now using that little button in the chat window. And then we just have a nice plot that's kind of ready for whatever report you're writing. X and Y axes look a lot better. Dots have a little more spacing around them. And this is the type of thing that I'd be, trying to search for how to do all these little things on my own. I can just ask Copilot to help clean up the figure a little bit more. Yeah, so those are the couple demos I wanted to show y'all. We're gonna hop back over to the slideshow here, and then we can answer some more questions after.
Awesome, thanks, Rob. So I think Copilot is loved by developers, and everybody who tried it or used it, they kind of feel satisfied and like their experience improved. So those are just a few quotes from our customers and users. Pretty much Duolingo noticed that 25%, there is a 25% increase in overall developer efficiency. Those are some other quotes from Coyote Logistics, hey, it's super cool that somebody finally started thinking about developer experience. And GitHub is truly paying attention to developer persona, and we truly try to make this experience to be as easy as possible and as pleasant as you guys see. We can maybe jump to another slide. So GitHub Copilot, and overall, I think GitHub is one of the best companies to use and work for. We're very generous. We give a lot of things for free. So you can try Copilot for free for 30 days. You just need to have an extension and IDE to try it out. We also have a Copilot for businesses. So if you belong to an organization, you can have Copilot as well available. Rob presented the chat version. I think chat is a game changer because you truly get a lot of information and insights, and you don't need to go outside of your IDE. Pretty much you have everything there. And yeah, if we go to the next slide, I think what we really care is the customer feedback and user feedback. So if you have used Copilot, there is a discussion that you can participate and leave us a feedback. We want to make sure like we are building it for you, for developers, and for organizations. So if you have any opinion, please post it in the discussion. We have Copilot Trust Center, and this is something part of responsible AI. Microsoft and GitHub are really committed to follow specific standards on responsible AI, which is like privacy, security, trust, and so on. So if you have any questions or organization have questions, that Trust Center should answer most of it. In 2 weeks, we have GitHub Universe, which is our annual conference where we will announce a lot of cool stuff, including additions to Copilot and so on. So if you are going there, that's great. If not, everything will be live stream. And yeah, if you want to try the chat, as Rob said, it's available for VS Code and Visual Studio. And again, we care about the feedback, so please submit it. And we are, we're trying to move as fast as possible with like adjusting everything. So now we can open it for questions.
Let's thank our speakers. Thank you for that. I definitely saw some new tricks I want to try. So maybe first question is, do you have any, what tips for users to get started?
Yeah, so a couple, well, first, give it a try if you haven't. One thing I will say that I didn't mention in my presentation is that context, like whatever context you can add to Copilot is going to be helpful. And so what I like to tell developers is, of course, if you're working in a file that already has some context, like not the rocks, paper, scissors one where I was starting it up from scratch, prompting it with some comments, all of that. I mean, that's good if you're starting from scratch. But Copilot really considers the tabs that you have open in your IDE. So if you have relevant tabs, we do suggest opening those up, and Copilot can consider context, both chat and our code completion version will consider context from those tabs as well. So it can jumpstart Copilot a little bit into constructing prompts, making good suggestions for you.
Okay, a couple of questions. So thank you for this demo. I noticed that in Copilot demos is usually start from scratch, build things. Most of the time, I don't know about you, but I spend in existing code bases adding features. What would have been an even cooler demo for me is, say, take like a Zilliz open source, go into the code base, add the feature that the gentleman was speaking about earlier, about queues or this, like let's do some real stuff. Because the rock, paper, scissors, I appreciate, doesn't pay the bill for Copilot. And the other comment is, so one on is it even usable on existing code bases? Because I haven't really seen. And then the second comment is, are you exploring other input interfaces? Because this comment-based input interface, for example, you typed as much in comments as you would have typed the actual code.
Mm-hmm.
So that's two. Then do I go back and clean up the comments? Like, what do I actually do? The user interaction model. And again, I apologize if it sounds like a criticism. It's just trying to give you feedback.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I think Kasia said it right from the start. We're like super grateful for the feedback. It doesn't sound like a criticism. Like, yeah, bring it on for sure. I guess one from my own personal experience. And I'll just quickly and then pass it over. But my own personal experience, I'm doing the same thing. I'm like hopping in a pre-existing code base just the other day, for example. And we should have demos that show this a little bit more. But like, I don't really program in Go that much, but I was hopping into one of our code bases that is largely Go. And I was totally using Copilot, both the code completion and the chat, to be like asking chat to just explain what's going on here. Like, I don't know what these couple of lines do. Explain this for me. And if I have neighboring tabs open on the IDE, it can pull in context to also try to explain what's happening there. So I totally use it in the way that you suggested it even. And thank you for the feedback on the demo style and all of that. Appreciate that. Kasia?
Oh, no, like let's maybe take
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, let's go. So yeah, first I've been using Copilot for a while now, and it's really great. Like it really improved my experience. So thank you for that. I had a question regarding the field right now because there's more products coming every day around like developer experience and everything. Especially a new IDE that's called Cursor that really integrated AI into the development. And so I was wondering if you guys are more looking towards making this feature of having like those completion directly into your code really stronger, or are you looking to build more features around that? So we saw the chat demo, which is pretty impressive. Are you more looking to like expand these tools, or are you looking to make it like the one you're doing really stronger?
Yeah, so maybe I'll try to answer it. So definitely, again, this is just the beginning. Like the Copilot is 1 year old, and we are adding AI into more products and features on GitHub. So you will learn more in 2 weeks what's happening. But yes, definitely there is an appetite to provide more. GitHub will be an AI-powered platform, and like the extensions or like using other IDs, I think that's on the roadmap. But I think for now we're just focusing on like making Copilot to be a high quality, code suggestion AI programmer. And definitely there's a lot of work that GitHub is doing in order to scale and make it really good. So yeah, for sure we're thinking about it, but it will take time.
So I have some question based on the gentleman asked previously, right? Like if you see like code, it's not just one function, right? Like there is design patterns, and there is like if there is already existing code, you want to make sense out of like how the call structure is going on, right? Like does Copilot also help in that aspect, or just like filling out the function and like things in the function?
Oh, I would believe it helps in the figuring out the structure as well. That's how, yeah, that is another way that I use it. I guess again, in the mode where you're starting from scratch, I think you do have to give it some kind of context to work with, right? So it would be that type of demo, that type of work would be better as this person suggested, kind of like starting with your existing code space, opening up relevant tabs. And I mean, I will say, even if you're opening up like other tabs, we have this extra layer that will try to filter relevant versus irrelevant for you and find, I guess, the structure you're looking for. So yeah, it should work in that particular use case as well. Mm-hmm.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. So I have 2 questions. I wanted to know, because it's been like, I think 2.5 years since Copilot was released. I wanted to know what improvement have you made in those 2.5 years to the product? And also, are you using, what model are you using? Do you guys make your own model trained on GitHub repos, or how does it work?
So I guess the training happens, we partner with OpenAI, so we are using their codex, also Microsoft, and some open source, libraries, and whatever code is on open source. So everything is like the explain in the trust center. In terms of improvements, I think we launched 1 year ago, so right around like 1 year ago. So I think we made a lot of improvements in terms of like the quality, like the security, and like overall like understanding prompts more, and like providing better quality suggestions. And we are adding Copilot to, again, more services, especially like you guys will learn in 2 weeks. I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, there's a lot of cool features, and Rob is like a prompt engineer, so he can talk about prompts.
Yeah, I feel like we're always, yeah, I've only been working on Copilot for the past 6 months, and like the amount of change that happens on Copilot in 6 months feels like a ton. We're in particular, yeah, come up and chat with me after for like more specifics. But I do think our goal is, and this relates to like an earlier question, is for sure developing these new features, which, you know, chat is being able to GA chat, at least for VS Code right now, was a huge milestone for us. But then we are, especially on like the prompt engineering team, we're really working on these like incremental changes that can help every suggestion that Copilot makes be a little bit better. So we're focused on like big picture shifts like chat or something, which really change how we do our day-to-day work, as well as the incremental wins where, yeah, suggestions or chat suggestions are like just a little bit better all the time with our testing that we do. Yeah. I mean, chat was really fun for me as like, because I use it a lot, you know, with my stats work or whatever. So I like that one.
Oh,
hey.
Hey there. First of all, thanks for hosting us. Big fan of GitHub and everything you do. And thanks to Zilliz for hosting the event. Super great. So I'm curious to get your guys' perspective too. Like we're in this time where people are building AI tools and developer tools. How does GitHub Copilot like talk to other startups and say, hey, we want other startups to build in the developer tool space to be a complement to GitHub Copilot? You know, what are the areas that you want to see developers build in the developer lifecycle in terms of like AI tools? And please let me know. I'm on my last brain cell, so if the question doesn't make sense, happy to clarify.
So I would say definitely we have some kind of partnerships and work with like projects and startup. Microsoft business development team is like really focusing like on a higher level with like partnerships on improving Copilot, and like don't want to spoil a few things, but pretty much we're partnering. Yes. So the answer is we are. It's pretty much has to be in a developer ecosystem, developer tools. And we have a bunch of programs like GitHub for startups, where actually if you are a startup, you can join the program. You get pretty much free GitHub for like 20 license of enterprise and other like features. And we kind of work with those startups to figure out like, hey, what's next? And we kind of help with like open source communities, like help you pretty much grow your open source communities and like giving you best practices. So there are like funnels to do it. It's just pretty much, you know, the entire world is built on GitHub. So it's for us, it's very hard to kind of make a really like, hey, yeah, this is the partner startup we're going with, right? So, yeah.
So I guess like a good example is like, let's say like I love VS Code and I got Copilot as an extension. Is there anything you guys are thinking it'd be like, oh man, it'd be really great if another developer built like another AI VS Code extension to complement what we've already built? Stuff that you might say, I don't know if it makes sense for us to invest engineering time in this, but it's a problem. Like, is there any like technical area that you think like, oh, maybe GitHub Copilot isn't going to tackle, but you want to see people build in? You know,
yeah.
Does that make sense? You know?
Does, yeah. And I think, yeah, we can talk about it, but yes, that's kind of what we are seeing. And especially on the marketplace, you will see a bunch of it. So extensions and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi. Thank you for having us. Very fun topic. I am a customer.
Thank you.
My question is like, when you work on a large code base, either develop yourself or taking over from somebody else, it's just the main challenge is untangling the mess. So I was wondering, and I have been looking for solutions for almost over a year by now, and I haven't been able to find good products in the marketplace right now. There is one person who is working on something cool, but he's unresponsive, and some ad hoc small solutions. And that is about visualization of call navigator graphs. So in SQL, for example, there are good solutions already. There is clear execution path. You can follow the code, figure out the optimization, what is linked to what. Product basis, DBT, Atlan. I cannot find something in for the code. Do you guys think about something like that? in the roadmap, or question to the broader audience here, this would be a cool idea in my opinion. And I would be one of your first customers if you let me know. Thank you.
I would say probably we are, but you know, it's probably gonna take some time. So if there's someone else building it, that's great. But yeah, I feel like we've been talking about it, but it's all about priorities and what's the most important case.
Mm-hmm. But like, yeah,
Yeah.
happy to chat about that use case too. Thanks.
Hi, thank you for hosting this. So you said you are working on incrementally to see how you can actually write better prompts or add more prompts to increase the overall utility.
Yeah.
For like in general use cases.
Yeah.
How do you benchmark it? Do you like compare the results with Cursor or other alternatives out there, or how do you kind of benchmark it compared to your previous outputs as well?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of, just talking about kind of my day-to-day, there are some more like offline benchmarking that other folks on the team are involved on, but my day-to-day really looks like, just speaking generally, it's like, let's change how the prompt is constructed, maybe the order, maybe the length of the prompt, because we're always getting more new token space or whatever. Ship that change and compare it to whatever our baseline or control is. So I mean, that's more how I'm working in terms of prompt engineering. Yeah, the benchmarking maybe happens prior to doing the online stuff that I'm more involved with. Yeah, that process, I don't know, I'm really interested in that evaluation process as well, and happy to chat about it. But yeah, my work is mostly like, let's make some modifications to what our baseline is for Copilot, see how folks, if they're, accepting changes, if they like what Copilot's offering or not. Thanks.
Yeah, so let's thank our speakers again. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting us, and thanks to everybody for showing up. We have this place until 8:30. If you had more questions, please catch a speaker. We'll be sticking around until 8:30. And I always end it with, I hope you learned something new from a speaker or somebody you spoke to or met somebody new, and hope to see you next time. Thanks.
Oh, my love.